Good morning, Harborview Fellowship. We're so excited to worship with you this morning. Won't you stand and worship with us?
Hallelujah.
song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Sing holy. Holy, there is no one like Jesus, thank you. Thank you for meeting us here. Giving us your presence, Lord, that we can worship you. Continue to fill up our hearts, Lord, from the week that we've had, taking out distractions that might be pulling us from focusing our eyes wholly on you. Lord, give us a taste of heaven this morning, that we might be filled. Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break at your name. Still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still, every wave at your name. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Oh, your name is light, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. No. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, oh, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Lord, thank you for the power of your name. Thank you that with that name we can move mountains, we can see healing, we can literally become a new person in your name, Lord Jesus. Thank you. We worship you. You gave your life for mine, nailed to the cross, you crucified all my sin and shame. It was washed by your mercy. And you are the treasure I find, my reason for living. So let my life be an offering to the one who is worthy. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, High King of heaven, my King forever. You stormed the gates of my heart. The veil in between was torn apart. Now you hold the keys to the grave. 'Cause you bring things to life. You roll stones away. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, High King of heaven, my King forever. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, High King of heaven, my King forever. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, High King of heaven, my King forever. Sing it again, ready? All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, High King forever, my King forever. It's always awesome to take a moment in your worship and can close your eyes and just sing these words. I know you may not have heard this song before, but if you can just close your eyes for a moment, sing. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. Give it to him. Lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. Jesus, thank you. Thank you for giving your whole life for us, so that we can lift our hands up and give our whole life to you. Help us. Help us to get there. Help us to have the strength and the courage to do that, Lord. Thank you so much for this time that we have together to worship. Amen. Oh, the 4th and 5th graders can leave. Thank you so much. Would you have a seat?
And I'm Esther.
Welcome to Harborview Fellowship. These are your announcements. Everything we share with you today can be found on our website, www.harborviewfellowship.org. You can also download the mobile app from your device's app store. Just search Harborview Fellowship.
Our weekly ministries have something for everyone. HF Kids posts a new video every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. with lessons, fun, and parent tips. These videos expand the topics learned in class.
The Edge Youth Group for middle school and high schoolers meets on Wednesday nights starting at 6:15 p.m.
Regen, a gathering for 18 to 30-year-olds, meets twice a month on the first and third Sundays at the Freeman's house.
Anyone and everyone can join us for prayer each Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. and Thursday from 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. Also, join us 45 minutes before each church service in the youth room.
This summer's Vacation Bible School for Kids, Zoomerang, is happening June 27th through July 1st. Camper registration is now available. Incoming kindergartners up to outgoing 5th graders are welcome to be part of the fun.
There's even a limited preschool class available first to volunteers. Cost is $35 per camper with $105 max per family. Invite family and friends.
Biblical Citizenship is back. This 3-day intensive video series from Rick Green and the Patriot Academy will give you insight to the biblical principles incorporated into the foundation of our nation and our Constitution. Watch it on the big screen starting Friday, June 3rd, and following on Saturday and Monday. Early registration is $60 by May 27th. Registration is online or on the mobile app.
You've seen this logo and know that it means Churchwide Missions. Our website has all the information, and you can find it from the menu bar or hamburger menu if using a mobile device, then Ministries and Churchwide Missions.
Even if you haven't registered for a missions opportunity yet, come to the 5-part training on Thursdays. Like Biblical Citizenship, we are calling these nights Kingdom Citizenship. You will learn about the dynamics of culture when ministering, preparing and sharing your testimony, hearing God speak to you for others, how to share the gospel, and how spiritual transactions and warfare changes lives.
Team training is meeting Thursday night starting this week, May 26th. This 5-week training series is for the whole family. Come as early as 5:30 p.m. and bring your own dinner with you to eat together. Then training will begin at 6:30 p.m.
We didn't forget the kids. They will have fun at these nights too, with bounce houses and activities they won't want to miss.
Ministry continues to grow and your giving is critical. You can give in 4 ways. Number 1.
Online through our website, www.harborviewfellowship.org/give.
Number 2.
Through the HF app. Number 3,
at the physical address 4819 Hunt Street Northwest, Gig Harbor, Washington 98335,
and number 4.
at any of the blue boxes around the church. That's all the announcements for this week. I'm Josiah.
And I'm Esther.
We are out.
Thank you, guys. Good to see everybody this morning. We are going to continue in Nehemiah, but before we do, want to have a reinforcement of the mission. And so if you want to come up, and I'm asking Joshua to help me with this. And just for any of us who are not yet sure what it's about, we want to take one more opportunity to explain it. And so with a couple of questions, and I'm quite tech challenged, and everybody around me knows that. And so I thought if Joshua could kind of help me walk through this, it would be able to help you walk through it as well. What we're doing this year is a church-wide mission, and it's allowing us to get engaged in a more local kind of a way. And so, Joshua, if I'm hearing about this church-wide mission and I want to find out information, where do I go to get the information?
Yeah, it's on. I believe it's on. I don't hear myself. Testing one. Oh, okay. We're on. Yeah. So we have our website here, like Esther and Josiah showed us just a second ago. You can go to the Ministries tab, and then at the bottom of Ministries we have Churchwide Missions, and that shows us where all the missions are. And if you scroll down the page, you can see all the opportunities. I think right now we're at 10 different items, and we may be adding more.
And so then if I have an interest in any of these, all I have to do is click the red square. Is that the deal?
Yeah, so you hit the learn more. So let's say if you want to do the ground wire, this has a brief overview, but then this will take us to our application website. Gives you a little bit more information about that particular mission. If you're interested, you can click on the bottom where it says Apply Today.
Okay, so on the bottom, some of you might not be able to see it, so I click Apply Today. It takes me to, what's that?
This is a login, so you can create your login for if it's the first mission that you've signed up for. You just create a one-time login for your person, and then there's an application forms that you'd have to sign.
Okay.
And then once you do that once, then you can use that for additional missions.
Is that complex?
It's not very complex. It's probably as simple as or as difficult as making an Amazon account. And have
we're
you
good
shopped
at that,
at Amazon before?
Yeah. We can do Amazon. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. That's,
okay. So that lets me know about the individual programs that are being offered that I can participate in, get engaged in. Mm-hmm. What if I'm not quite sure yet, but I don't want to miss out on the training? The equipping starts Thursday night. What do I do with that?
If you don't have an idea of which mission you want to do, but you still want to attend the training, on the page we have our training schedule listed down here.
Yep.
And then this red button just below it, that sends you to a form. It's pretty informal, just your name and the number of people that you would be bringing, so that we have an expectation of tables, chairs, how many kids to line up for the bounce house, that sort of thing.
So this is really important.
This is important, yeah.
Very important. Okay. And and then I understand that there's a cost of $25 to take care of all the background checks and all that kind of stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that would be in the application.
Yep.
So if you do plan to do multiple missions, for further help, Susan Erickson, who's not here today, but she would be one that you could email to help you get your application to the multiple missions, so you don't pay that $25 multiple times.
All of that's on the website.
That is, so
okay.
I can take you there. It is here. So we have, it should be a little clearer, but we have Susan Erickson. Her information is in there.
Got it.
Yeah. So there.
Yeah.
Yep. Step
Got
one.
it.
So if you want to do multiple missions opportunities, Susan Erickson is in there.
Okay. Great. Super. Sounds good. Well, Joshua, thank you for putting all this together.
Yeah,
I mean, this
welcome.
guy works late at night getting all this stuff wrapped up. Thank you so much. Appreciate it big time. And I want to encourage you to engage. It's a great way to get to meet others and have a great time seeing lives get changed. A lot of different activities, so no matter how you're wired, you'll be able to find a place that's going to help you get engaged with it as well. I want to encourage that. We're going to continue on in our study of Nehemiah. And what I want to do is show a quick little video clip. It's about 6 minutes long, and want to use it as a review and also a little bit of a snippet into where we're going here this morning. And it's an animation. Are you guys okay if it's an animation? I mean, man, animations are almost real life nowadays. It's crazy. I was a man born before my time because I would have loved to have animation when I was a kid. But anyway, what I want to do is this animation is going to give you a brief background to Nehemiah and do a much better job doing it in this video than what I could do in painting picture words or words of pictures. And so anyway, what I want to do is show this. It's going to give you where we've been and also a heads up into where we're going today as well. So Mary, if you want to kick that off, that'd be great.
The film that you are about to see is based on an authentic journal written 2,500 years ago and recorded in the Bible. The author, an eminent Jew, is a high-ranking official in the court of the Persian king. Nehemiah, for they are coming to kill you. In the night, they will come to kill you. It all began in 538 BCE, when Cyrus issued a proclamation that caused great elation among the Jews. In an imperial order circulated throughout the Persian Empire, Cyrus allowed the Jews who had been exiled to Babylonia with the destruction of the first temple to return to the land of Israel. After 70 years in exile, tens of thousands of Jews left their home and went up to Jerusalem. But soon the enthusiasm faded, the stream of migrants dwindled, and those who arrived in Jerusalem found a city in ruins, its walls broken down, isolated and destitute. The Jews became easy prey for the surrounding nations. As hostilities mounted, life in Jerusalem became unbearable. The dream of the return to Zion was on the brink of collapse. On the other side of the world, far from the suffering of their brethren, the Jews prospered and produced dignitaries such as Nehemiah, the son of Hachaliah, a high-ranking official in the Persian court. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the capital city of Shushan, Hanani, one of my brethren, came from Judah with some men. I asked them about the remaining Jews who had been left behind from the captivity and about Jerusalem. They told me, the remnant who were left behind from the captivity there in the province are in a terrible state and in disgrace, and the wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates burnt. Distressed by the words of his brethren, Nehemiah wanders restlessly through the halls of the royal court, crying and praying. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when the wine was set before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. The troubled look on Nehemiah's face aroused the king's suspicions. The king said to me, "Why do you look troubled since you are not ill? It must be from evil intentions." Then I was very frightened. I said to the king, "Why should I not look troubled when the city where my ancestors are buried lies waste, its gates consumed by fire?" Nehemiah musters all his courage and implores the king, "If it pleases the king, send me to Judah, to the city where my ancestors are buried, so I can build it." The king agrees. He appoints Nehemiah governor of the province of Yehud and sends him to Jerusalem with a military escort. Nehemiah leaves the pleasures of the Persian Empire behind. He is driven by a single goal, to build the wall of Jerusalem. But Nehemiah's appointment as governor of Yehud infuriates the leaders of the neighboring nations. They are vehemently opposed to the rebuilding of the wall. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard, they were very distressed that someone had come to do good for the children of Israel. They refused to let Jerusalem once again be the center of life of the Jewish people. Therefore, when Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem, he slips out secretly to check on the state of the wall. So I came to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. And I arose at night, I and a few men with me. And I told no one what my God had inspired me to do for Jerusalem. And I had no animal with me other than the animal I was riding. What Nehemiah saw was depressing. The entire area around the wall was full of fallen stones and ruins. He was barely able to pass through. I inspected the broken walls of Jerusalem and its gates that had been consumed by fire. There was no room for the animal under me to pass. I went through the valley gate and returned. Right here in the area of the ruined wall that Nehemiah inspected, archaeologist Yigal Shiloh found a massive rockfall from the wall and the houses of the city. Turns out that when the Babylonians destroyed the wall, they also destroyed the network of terraces supporting the homes of the city. All the houses collapsed and the stones fell down the hill. Without a wall, there is no security, and without security, it is impossible to survive. But rebuilding the wall seems to Nehemiah an impossible task. It would involve clearing rubble heaps, gathering stones, and engaging in a huge amount of rigorous construction. It would take a lot of hard work and time, and there is no time. At any moment, the neighboring rulers might discover the plan and crush it. Nehemiah appeals urgently to the people of Jerusalem. I said to them, "You see the bad state we are in, how Jerusalem lies waste, its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, so that we are no longer a disgrace." Nehemiah decides to leave the ruins as they are and build the new wall higher up at the top of the hill. The entire plan now depends on the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They must drop everything and apply themselves to the
There's a lot that's in there. You know, it's kind of interesting. Walls are part of the news in Nehemiah's day, just like our day. That passed over most of your heads. That's okay. But anyway, as we're looking at Nehemiah, one of the stories that comes out of this, or one of the messages in the story that comes out of this, is how the good is relentlessly in opposition. Have you ever noticed that whenever you're about something that is good, that which is right, that which is God's purposes, that there's relentless opposition to it? And as you're pressing forward and moving forward in it, the minute you stop and take a breath, the minute you stop and just kind of recover, no matter what, that evil comes in and just fills in those spaces again. And that's the battle we have as believers, as Christians, that we are in a war and we're not on a vacation. And it's hard for us to kind of get that mindset in westernized Christianity, but that is the reality. And what we're going to see with Nehemiah is there was a constant, relentless pursuit to oppose that which God had called him to do as we move forward in this book and into chapter 2. And so we see that last week we began the background to it. If you were not here last week, I encourage you to listen to it so you can get the background to Nehemiah. We're not going to take the time to highlight that here this morning. And let's move into Nehemiah arriving in Jerusalem and beginning in chapter 2, verse 9. Last week we went from chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 8. Here in verse 9 of chapter 2, it says, "Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them the king's letters." Remember last week we'd received that the king just was unbelievable in providing for Nehemiah passage back to Jerusalem and wrote letters of passage giving him the right and the freedom to move through all the different territories without opposition, without battle, without war. And so he arrives there with the king's letters, showing it to the governors in the other provinces. Goes on to say, "Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen." In other words, he had a military escort. "And when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite servant, heard this, It displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. And so immediately, before there's ever a bit of construction that is done, there is opposition that comes, and this opposition is going to be relentless throughout the story of the rebuilding of the walls that takes place. And when he arrived in Jerusalem, being met with that opposition, he already had to be geared up for what was going to be ahead of him. And one of the things that's important for us to understand in this opposition is we see it in the natural realm in this account. But there's more than just a natural realm, and those of us who've been around here a bit understand that, the one world with the two realms that we live in. And we would not see it in the account with Nehemiah that there was a spiritual realm. But a contemporary of just a few decades earlier, Daniel, actually speaks to this. Daniel, being in exile, as Nehemiah was in the same area, in the same region, was reading the book of Jeremiah, and in reading the book of Jeremiah came across the writings that Israel would be released out of that exile at around the 70-year period. And Daniel, in reading that, realized we're getting close to that 70-year period, so he began to pray, and pray that God would release the word for Israel's future. And as he began praying, he went on, we're told, for 1 week and 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and he heard and received nothing from the Lord. And then there was an angel that appeared to him. And this angel said to him, Daniel, the minute you began praying 3 weeks ago, God sent me to you. But I've been in a war. And it's been a war that I've been fighting against the prince of Persia. Now, that prince is not a material prince or a physical prince, but a spiritual demonic being prince. And I've been fighting against this prince of Persia for all this time, and I couldn't get breakthrough until finally Michael, your archangel, came, and he assisted me, and finally was able to get breakthrough, and now here I am. In fact, we read this in Daniel chapter 10 and verse 20, when it says, Then he said, this is the angel speaking to Daniel, Do you know why I've come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. And we know, most of us know by now, that Greece was 200 years out from becoming the world empire. And so here is this angelic being saying to Daniel, I'm now leaving you, but I'm going to leave you with a message for Israel, for the prophecy concerning Israel. God's got amazing things planned for Israel, and he lays it out, and then he leaves. When he leaves, he's going to be fighting this demonic prince over all of Persia, and eventually be fighting the demonic prince over all of Greece. What we understand and learn from this, folks, is that there are demonic princes over nations in this world. They want to do everything they can to oppose what God is going to do. They want to oppose God's work. They want to oppose God's work nationally, internationally, locally, want to oppose God's work in your life and in my life. There is a very real world out there with demonic beings and elect beings or angelic beings, and there is a war going on of such a massive nature that it would be very difficult for us to imagine what that war must look like. And so here's Nehemiah. When Nehemiah comes, immediately he experiences opposition, and they've not even started the rebuilding yet. Why is that? Why is it that already there's this preemptive work? And the reason for this is, and we don't know how and do not know why, those of you who've gone through Living Free recognize this, the enemy somehow, some way knows and understands the work and the plans and the purposes of God for individuals, for people, for churches, for families, for nations, and it will do everything possible to preempt that. And so what he does then is energize and empower human beings to carry out the works that they have designed that are in the spirit realm to come against what God is going to do in the natural realm also. And so if we ask ourselves the question, man, it just seems like every effort for good, every effort that is God's work, every effort for us to advance and move forward, there is opposition that comes, and it is relentless. We can never let up. It's constantly coming against us. That is why. It is more than mere humanity. There is an energy. There is a viciousness. There is a relentless pursuit that comes from the spirit world, from the demonic realm, that energizes human beings to accomplish the work of the enemy. And so that's why when I get blown away sometimes at the lack of shame of those who are operating in an evil kind of way at what they do. And the reason for that is because of how they're energized. And they're empowered and energized by evil, wicked, demonic beings. And Nehemiah is beginning to experience this. So now we're going to move back into the natural realm, okay? We took a bit of a breather there, went with Daniel into the spirit realm. Now we're going to come back into the natural realm and see what's going on with Nehemiah. Let me also say this real quick before we go to this next little spot. What we need to understand is that God has purposes on this earth to advance His kingdom, and He uses people. He uses you and me. He equips us, He empowers us, He leads us, He guides us, and it's going to be through people that God's going to accomplish His kingdom purposes on this earth. The enemy has his kingdom purposes, and guess what he's going to do? He's going to use people. And he's going to use people to accomplish his purposes. So what we have to be able to do is realize that when we see something happening in the natural realm, I need to ask myself the question, so what is the spiritual agenda and source behind all of this, and what's trying to be accomplished? And we've got to learn to be able to operate in both realms simultaneously. So now Nehemiah is back considering all of this, and we see he arrives in Jerusalem, and we see his preparation. And he's getting oriented. Verse 11, so I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. So now Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem, and we're not told anything else. Man, I wish Nehemiah would have just wrote down a couple more notes as to what he was doing in those 3 days. Why 3 days? Why is there nothing said? Why is nothing going on? And so it leaves us then to sacred conjecture. And so I'm going to share some conjecture. It's not gospel. It's not inspired of God. It's just some conjecture. Your conjecture is as good as my conjecture. But let me just share a little bit of what I think might have been going on. Number one, Nehemiah was probably resting. That had been at least 3 months, plus or minus, an arduous journey from over in Persia through the Fertile Crescent and finally got into Jerusalem. And I'm sure he took just a day or so to recover from that trip. I know when we make international trips and we go halfway around the world, man, I love to have a day to just kind of catch my breath in that. I'm sure that was part of it. I think another thing that was going on is that Nehemiah was probably also getting oriented to the people that are there. As far as we know, Nehemiah had not made any trips to Jerusalem. This is his first. We do not know otherwise. And so now he's coming into a place, into a city, and there's some people there. There's a bit of a society there, and he's probably getting introduced to the players that are in Jerusalem and what's a part of that. Another thing that's probably happening too is he's probably continuing to process what he's heard from God. God has spoken to him, and we're going to see this in just a little bit. God has spoken to him as what he wants him to do. And so it's one thing to receive something prophetically. It's one thing to receive a report from others who've been there, but you've not been there. Now he's there in real time, and he's probably taking some time to continue praying and processing what he's seeing in real time with what he has heard, both from others in a report and then also prophetically from the Lord. So we come to verse 12, and we see that after the 3 days, he surveys the situation. Verse 12 through 15, then I rose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. So that's the phrase right there. When Nehemiah was praying, when he heard the report, it wasn't merely for supplication. It wasn't merely to petition God. He was also receiving from the Lord what God wanted him to do. And so up to this point, he has told nobody what God had put on his heart concerning this. It says, there was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. Verse 13, I went out by night by the valley gate to the dragon spring and to the dung gate, and these mean nothing to you, but I'll show you where this is at in just a little bit. And I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall I turned back, I entered by the valley gate, and so returned. So up to this point, Nehemiah has trusted nobody with what God has given to him. Probably because he wasn't sure who he could trust, number one. And then also at the same time put some of the processing together, and he was still processing. And so in the nighttime, he gets up and he goes with a horse that he's riding and a few trusted men, and he walks around the gates, or I should say the walls of Jerusalem. Now this is a mock-up of what would have been in Nehemiah's time, and you see the configuration. We do not know exactly. There's some possible variance in this, but conservatively speaking, in other words, if we take the most conservative guesstimate of the walls at that time, it was 1.5 to 2 miles of wall. And so here's Nehemiah looking at the wall, trying to figure out what's in front of him, what's going on. And so during the nighttime, he is surveilling that, and where he's surveilling that is in the southern part of the walls. You see the big circle, the red circle, and it was talking about the different gates he walked through. Well, that's where he was at. He was walking in and through all the rubble and all that had gone on in this time and assessing it and what was taking place. And so in verse 16, we see now that he is still processing God's plan. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. So we're told here Nehemiah did not tell anybody at all. He was keeping all this to himself, and now he goes walking in and through this because this is a big, big job. This is a man that's going into a place, and he's assessed all that's going on, and he realizes the place is decimated. It's in rubble. There's just piles of debris. It's a ghetto. I mean, he's returning to a ghetto, if we can use that imagery to help us understand what's going on. And he realizes it, and this project is a huge project. Not only is it a huge project, but Israel recently has had a culture of defeat. 160 years ago, Israel was marched off out of Jerusalem into exile, into Babylon and into Persia. And so as there are in Assyria and Babylon, which became Persia, and so as they were taken away, it left virtually nobody that was in Jerusalem that had any kind of leadership, any kind of capacity. The Babylonians just siphoned all of that off of the city, and it was in disrepair. And it was literally a discouraging sight. So for 160 years, a culture of defeat has been established. And we know what happens with that. I mean, that's just like a cancer when you have a culture of defeat and it just moves and spreads its way out. So not only did he have this massive wall that had to be rebuilt, he had to somehow rejuvenate the people and get their hearts engaged in the project that was ahead of them, which also includes the issue of discouragement. They had been beaten up again and again and again and again. So Nehemiah is processing all of this. And he knows he can't speak too quickly. And he's getting ready. And now as he gets through with all of this process, he's ready to lead. And so we see his leadership kick in, begin with verse 17. There's an honest assessment that he makes. And he communicates with the people. He says, "Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. How Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned." So one of the things that's characteristic of leaders and good leadership is the fact that you're going to be honest about what you see. You're not going to try to sugarcoat it. You're not going to try to deny it. You've got to identify all the problems. If you do not identify the problems, you cannot bring a solution to it. And so Nehemiah is being very honest about it. And it's part of what we need to be doing in the times in which we're living in as well. We're living in times that are not good, that are not healthy. If you have any concern for God and His kingdom and His ways and His values, we're living in a time of immorality. We're living in a time of depravity. We're living in a time where the morality of this nation is just literally unwinding like a cheap suit. We just realize all that is going on around us is headed in the wrong direction, and it is not good. What's happening to our kids is not good. What's happening in the education system, it is not good. What's happening with government mandates and tyranny, it is not good. We have to be honest about all that is going on. We need to look at where the church has failed, and we need to be honest about it. We need to identify it. We've got to be those who can see with clear eyes about the situations in front of us. That is the beginning of good leadership and he did that. So he tells the people, as we look around us, we're in deep trouble. We have a huge, huge issue on our hands. But then he goes on from there and he says, come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. So he now is bringing all the people together, because if you don't get buy-in with the people, it's not going to happen. Nehemiah could not rebuild the wall by himself. It was going to take leadership not only to assess the situation, but then to capture the hearts of the people, get them rejuvenated to where they could get involved and get engaged as well. And he gave them a reason to build the wall. Are you tired of living under derision? Are you tired of being mocked? Are you tired of being plundered? Are you tired? And he tries to get them to realize you're living in a state right now that this is not a preferred state. This is not the way God designed you or me or us as his people or the city of Jerusalem to exist. This is not acceptable. And so he said, it's time that there's a change. Let us rise together and let's build this wall. And so it seems like the situation's impossible, but he's now beginning to get the momentum. We see the vision and motivation, verse 18. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. Nehemiah begins to encourage them. And what he says to them is this. Here's what happened when I was before the king. The king actually gave us his favor. Now that king was not known, Artaxerxes was not known to have a favor towards the Jewish people, the Israelites. And he gave us his favor. He gave me the letters of passage. He gave me all the materials we need to build the walls, to build the protection around the temple. He's given us all that we need to build the house that I need to have to direct this project that we're on. He also gave me letters of passage, and I was able to come this way without any obstruction, any obstacles, no wars, no battles. All I do is show him the king has given me permission. Also gave us a military escort. And we are here now. God has already demonstrated to us his favor by the impossible that he's already done. And he lets them know that God's favor is with them. Why? Because when we know that God's favor is with us, we can go forward. We can move forward. We know that it's going to be more than us that's going to accomplish it. It's going to be God who's going to be accomplishing it through us as well. And so as he gets through speaking to this, it says, and then they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the work. It was like a locker room talk. It was like a coach, and it was halftime, and they were behind, and it looked like it was impossible. And he starts speaking to them, and he connects with their heart. He captures their heart. He gives them a vision of what can be as they go to get back out on the field. And so he gets through with that talk. He gets through with the encouragement, and he says, okay, it's time for us now to get out there, and let's go and kick there, and let's move out of this locker room and get on that field and do what only God can allow us to do. And that's what they did. They said, let us rise up and build. They took ownership of it. They were willing to get involved and engage with this. And as soon as they do it, look what happens. Adversity. So how do you lead in adversity? Verse 19, but when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they jeered at us, they despised us, and they said, what is this thing that you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? So in other words, they started to bring mockery to God's people. They began to jeer at God's people. They began to diminish God's people. And that's the way the world system is, isn't it? I mean, even right now, isn't it the world system that is out there that's trying to make those who are of God, those who are godly, those who have biblical values, those who might be conservative in those biblical values, to look like they don't have a brain, look like they're foolish people, look like they're people of demise. And can I say that is just an old school tool of the enemy? I mean, it's his playbook. Larry said in the first service, his playbook is an old playbook. He doesn't have any new plays. So what's he try to do? He tries to make you and me and anyone else who has a heart for God and is moving forward in that which is right, that which is true, that which is of God, look like we don't have a clue what we're thinking about, will diminish us and will make us think that there's no hope in what we have to do in bringing about God's purposes on this earth. That's what they do. They jeer. Then not only that, they bring accusation. And all of this is lies. It's all lies. They bring accusations. So what are you getting ready to do? Rebel against the king? Well, man, if that was the case, they know that having the king of Artaxerxes and the Persian Empire come down on them would be unsustainable. And so they're trying to get them to be filled with fear. Can I say, again, like Larry said in the first service, that is an old play out of an old playbook. The enemy always uses fear to try to manipulate his purposes on this earth, and he was doing the exact same thing again. It's like we're seeing today's news 2,500 years ago, is it not? And folks, we look at the world in which we live in, our country right now, and it's in disrepair. It's in serious disrepair. And so we have a question that we got to ask ourselves. Are we just going to make peace with it? Are we going to be content with it? We're just going to let it kind of happen and not worry about God's kingdom coming to earth and His will being done on earth as it is in heaven and just give up? It's above us. It's beyond us. Let's just kind of live out our lives and heaven's coming. No, that's not why we're on this earth. He gave us this earth to steward it. He gave us this earth to bring His kingdom here and in play. And we have a responsibility. So someone says, well, Christians aren't supposed to get involved with politics. Folks, politics is involved with your life. And you better stand up and see it and recognize it. And you're either going to put a stop to it or you're just going to let them keep running over you. It's not an issue of politics. It's an issue of government. It's God's government and Satan's government. Satan, the ruler of this world, wants to bring his government and just literally overwhelm us with his values and his ways. But you see, we're God's ecclesia. You remember that term? God's governing representatives on this earth. That's what the term means. That's what's translated church in Matthew 16. And we're to represent Him with governing authority as His ambassadors, and we're to stand up in that. And so they come to Him, and they try to dissuade them before they ever get started. You see, the minute you begin to think you're going to do something that's advancing God's kingdom, the enemy is going to smell it, and he's going to do everything he can to shut you down before you ever get out of the gates. Now, we're going to see in the next couple of chapters, you get out of the gates, he's still going to try to shut you down. He's just going to try to keep shutting you down again and again and again and again. But I love what Nehemiah said and how he responded to it as a leader and encouraged with verse 20. Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, His servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. His response, he did not cower. He did not back down. He did not get nervous. He did not think, maybe we need to rethink this thing. No, instead, he said, we will rebuild. And the reason we're going to rebuild and the reason it's going to be successful is because God is the one who is behind us, who is supporting us in this. It is God who is going to be rebuilding this wall through us. And so we stand firm and strong. And it's not said here, but I'm sure he was thinking this. If you're concerned about telling Artaxerxes that we're rebelling against him, he's the one who gave us the letter and the materials, by the way, that we're going to be doing all this work with. And that's what God has done for us, folks. God has given us everything we need for life and godliness. God has given to us the power and the authority of Jesus Christ and every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies in our union with Jesus Christ. And greater is He that is in us than he who is in the world, and that we have nothing to back down about. We have nothing to cower about. We need to stand up in who God's called us to be. Nehemiah was confident in God's calling and purpose in his life. And folks, we need to quit playing the victim as those who are believers in Jesus Christ, realize the calling and purpose God has given to us in our lives, and in a humble confidence, in faith, stand up and resist and push back against all the schemes of the enemy that he's coming to assault your kids, your families, our freedoms, and all that is going on in our midst. And it's time that we as God's people stand up and say, enough is enough. Okay? Enough is enough. We need to get people with conviction in places of and positions of influence. We need to be those people in our neighborhoods where we work. We need to quit cowering when those who are used by the enemy to be proponents of his evil and his wickedness with boldness and brashness and no shame stand up for what is shameful. You ever stop to think about that? Why is it that those with the agenda of shameful purposes have no shame in standing up and being proponents of it? When we who have the very truth of God, the heart of God, the mind of God, the values of God, and we're his representatives for his ecclesia, cower in shame for what is right and what is good and what is holy. Folks, it's backwards. It's backwards. And we need to be willing to stand up in our places of influence, okay? Nehemiah had a huge realm. We all have our realms, don't we? We all have our networks. We all have our relationships. And in humility, we need to stand up. We need to quit backing up and cowering and giving place. Because I tell you, every time we take a step back, guess what the enemy's going to do? Is he going to stay there? Is he going to say, oh, I have enough territory already, I don't need any more? Is that what he's going to do? And the only way that he will stop and the only way that he will retreat is if we start taking the steps forward and we start pushing back in all that is coming against us in this world. That's exactly what we've got to do as God's people. And so he said, sorry, you've got the wrong news. The God of heaven is going to make us prosper. We're going to be successful. And oh, by the way, you've got no place in this city. Yeah, a boldness and a courage. The summary, what did he do? Real quick, let's just summarize this. Nehemiah assessed the situation. Folks, let's assess our situation. Let's be honest with it. Number 2, he received God's plan. Our ideas are not going to be successful. They're not going to work. If you right now are not sure you can hear God as he speaks to you, you need to work on that, because it's our only way forward. We have to have his word, which is a solid, sure word of prophecy, and we need to have his mind for specific elements that are going on in our life right now. We need to hear his voice. We need his plan, not our plans. We need his strategy, not our strategies. With our families, in the workplace, in our neighborhood, in our schools, we need his strategies. And so he received God's plan. He motivated the people to action. And folks, we've got to get motivated, and then we need to motivate those around us. We need to help people see the real picture. And then he contended with the opposition. In other words, he didn't just roll over. He stood up, and he contended. He pushed back. And we've got to do the same. It's time for us to realize the days of just benign praise times and testimony times are gone in this country for the Church of Jesus Christ. We're now at a time where it's a call to spiritual war and spiritual battle. I'm not talking about militant, ugly activities that are physical in that nature. I'm talking about spiritual war. And we have to see the world that we're living in right now is not a world that's favorable to God's people. Never has been. But it's becoming increasingly obvious to us now. So an application, here's the application. Number 1, be given to a God-sized purpose and life. Your life right now must be bigger than you. My life must be bigger than me. I need to recognize and understand that. I need to live for that which is beyond me. Nehemiah could have stayed back in Persia and lived a pretty comfortable life. But no, he took the burden of his people, the burden of his nation. He was a patriot for God and for Israel. And he took that burden upon himself. And he left the comforts and he went to Jerusalem. We need to be alert to the schemes of the enemy. 2 Corinthians 2:11 says we're not ignorant of the enemy's schemes. We need to be able to see the schemes of the enemy behind everything that's going on that we hear on the news, see on the news, see what's going on around us, where in the workplace, where we work. We need to see the enemy's agenda with what is going on. Need to understand those schemes and need to take appropriate action accordingly. Number 3, we need to be confident in God's identity and purpose for you. The calling in our lives, combined with living for that which is bigger than ourselves, that means it's going to affect the decisions I make. It's going to affect how I make those decisions. It's going to affect why I make those decisions. In other words, it's coming to grips with the reality, my life is not my own. And yeah, I'd really, really enjoy just kind of going and relaxing a little bit. But folks, we can't. If you have any value for who we are as a people, for our kids, for our grandkids, for all that we're going to be leaving as a heritage, we can't sit back and relax. We have to realize that God's got a calling for each and every one of us. And not one is greater than the other. It's all part of the body. And we all need to be filling our positions. We're going to be seeing this in Nehemiah a little bit later on as well. And then lastly, we need to be courageous in God with boldness. Folks, as God's people, let's implore one another. The days of cowardliness are gone. We need to stand up in courage. We need to stand up in a boldness. And a boldness that's in God, knowing who we are in Him, knowing what He's given us, and moving forward. And I believe with all my heart that as we will see in a little bit, that Nehemiah and Israel rebuilt the walls in record time, crazy record time, completed the impossible, that God can do the same thing today. But if Nehemiah would not have rose to the occasion, if the Israelites would not have rose to the occasion, it would never happen. There's that human-divine cooperation that must take place. And we have to take seriously this life that God's given us and this life in Him that He's given to us and the call that He's given to us in our lives. Amen? I want us to leave here today with courage, with hope, with realizing it's not all dead, done, and over with, signed, sealed, and delivered. No, there's hope. I think what God's doing is He's rising an army. He's helping people learn how to battle with their hands. He's helping people understand what it means to be committed to His kingdom. I was actually thinking about this week in a study, and worship team, you can come on up. I'm just kind of rambling now off script. I was thinking this week, it's really interesting when you think about life, and we think about we're giving our lives to God. And what if it means that me giving my life to God means that I die a physical death in that service? And many, 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 many believers around the world have done that for millennia. And even right now today, there's more martyrs per capita in the world today than any time in church history right now. That's the world we're living in. And I thought, it's not going to be a bad swap to end up in God's presence in heaven, number one. But number two, you realize there's people who are so committed to their cause that they actually will give their lives up into death, such as terrorists. I mean, they literally are so sold out, they'll willingly, knowingly give up their physical life to accomplish what is a very evil and wicked end in terrorism. Can we at least be able to say, God, here I am? It's not saying that I am going to die, but if I set that as the worst that can happen to me, everything else is manageable. And so for us to realize, God, I want to be used by you, and I give my life to you. We sang a song earlier, didn't we? I raise my hands and I lay down my life. Did we mean it? Were we serious when we sang it? or was just words up on a screen, and everybody else was singing it, so I thought I'd sing it too. Or if I wasn't sure that I could sing it, that I stopped singing because I wasn't sure I was serious about it. Now I'm talking about being honest in our worship, and honest in our prayers, and honest in our lives. I know it's kind of got a little bit heavy here towards the end of the service, and I apologize for that. Kind of. Not really. But as I look over the landscape of what's going on in our country and the church, just read an article this week or last week. Do you realize an article with a survey that was taken that just over a third of pastors in America believe in a biblical worldview? Yeah.
Scary.
Worship leaders, barely a quarter, 25%, believe in a biblical worldview. And the biblical worldview was set up by George Barna with just 6 major, minimal, irreducible, minimal requirements, such as the Bible is absolute truth, kind of a thing. There was so much that wasn't mentioned that I would have required as a biblical worldview that wasn't on there. And I was shocked at the numbers. And we asked what's going on in the world right now, folks. My heart broke reading that article. Shame on us. Those who name the name of Jesus Christ, evangelical churches going woke. Shame on us as the Church of Jesus Christ. Unless we wake up, unless there's a revival, we cannot expect God to do what only God can do in the work that needs to be done. Now, how do we kind of go out of here in hope? There's hope, okay? And that's hope in Jesus Christ. But that's hope is when we make a change in our hearts and our lives towards Him. Amen? Amen. Let's stand together. Let's sing.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory is the victory. Oh, yes, it is. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Oh God, you are my living
Man, there's so much we could continue to say, but kids are in Sunday school. You know, when the disciples were threatened in the book of Acts, chapter 4, they had a reaction. Their reaction was to pray. Let me read their prayer to the Lord and let us make it ours. Acts chapter 4, verse 29 and 30. And now, Lord, look upon their threats and grant your servants to continue to speak your truth with all boldness, while you stretch out your hand to heal, and signs and wonders are performed through the name of your holy servant, Jesus. Lord, give us boldness so we can do our part and do the part that only you can do. In Jesus' name, amen.
HF Kids, it's Sunday morning with Miss Margaret and Miss Kelly. HF Kids, come and join us while we learn some truth from the Bible today. We will sing and we will pray, see our friends and laugh and play. HF Kids, it's Sunday morning with Miss Margaret and Miss Kelly.